Snow fell through the darkness like ash, smothering the earth in silence. It was Christmas Eve, 1854, and Fort Pueblo lay quiet beneath the drifting white. The outpost, built of adobe and timber, hugged the frozen banks of the Arkansas River, its walls rising from the plains like a forgotten ruin. Inside, the last handful of men stirred beside their fires. They were trappers, traders, and frontiersmen, most far from family. They passed the night in uneasy peace, sharing meat and coffee, telling stories that curled like smoke into the rafters. The world outside was bitter and still. Coyotes howled from the distance. The river crackled under its crust of ice. But there was no alarm, no hint that anything was wrong. At first light, the snow had stopped. Dawn broke gray over the eastern hills, and with it came riders. They came in quietly, Utes and Jicarilla Apaches, wrapped in furs, mounted on shaggy ponies. Their breath steamed in the cold air. At their head rode Chief Tierra Blanca, known to the men inside the fort. These were not strangers. They had traded here many times before, furs for powder, meat for whiskey. There was no reason to fear them. The gates opened. Guns were not raised. No orders were shouted. The warriors were invited inside the thick-walled post, where the men of Fort Pueblo greeted them with weary nods. It was Christmas Day. Peace, at least for a few moments, still held, until it didn't. The first shot rang out like a bell. A sudden blast of thunder in the close adobe room. George Simpson, the fort's lead trader, fell backward, a bullet through his chest. Panic tore through the room, shouts, screams, the scramble of boots on frozen earth. But there was no time. The attack was swift, brutal, and without mercy. Knives flashed. Tomahawks rose and fell. Men were struck down before they could reach their rifles. Some were dragged from rooms and killed in the snow. Others tried to flee, but found the gates blocked. There was no organized defense, only chaos. In minutes, 17 men lay dead, white traders, Mexican workers, a trapper who had come for shelter and stayed too long. Their bodies were stripped, disfigured, and left scattered across the snow-slick ground. Blood froze where it pooled. The adobe walls turned red. Among the living, only a few were spared, women and children. Maria Rosa Villagrana and her 3 children were seized and taken prisoner. Others were marched south through the snow, forced to keep pace as smoke from the burning fort followed behind them. By midday, Fort Pueblo was a shell. The roof had caved in where fires were set. Doors hung open to the wind. The old flagpole leaned sideways, snapped at the base. Ash drifted like snow across the ruins. It would take weeks before the outside world even learned what had happened. When a party of soldiers and scouts arrived in January, they found only bones and soot, torn blankets frozen to the earth, the remains of journals and ledgers, half burned in the hearth, a pair of boots, one still with a foot inside. It wasn't random. This had been revenge. Earlier that year, Ute tribes had suffered attacks from American soldiers, betrayals during supposed peace talks, the killing of a respected leader. The Jicarilla Apaches had been pushed from their hunting grounds, their people dying of disease and starvation. For them, Fort Pueblo was not a home. It was an outpost of invasion, a symbol. And so it was destroyed. The massacre shook the region. Fear spread across the frontier like fire through dry grass. Treaties unraveled. Trust collapsed. What had once been uneasy coexistence began to rot into violence. Fort Pueblo was never rebuilt. Its ruins faded into the earth. By spring, even the smoke scars had disappeared. But the story lingered, in whispers around campfires, in the eyes of travelers who passed too close to the site, in the unease that settled like frost across the land. Because the truth was simple and brutal. Even on Christmas, even in peace, nowhere on the frontier was truly safe. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.